Someone had told me in 2019, 2020, 21, 22 that I would be able to carry a baby. Had laughed in I was laughing in my doctor's face when he said it. So you just never know how things can turn around for you.
Welcome to the Infertility Club. I am super excited for today's special guest, Kia Glover. Hi, Kia.
We'll see.
Kia recently wrote and published a book, Fooling My Fertility and Expecting at 50, How I Had a Baby in Midlife and You Can Too. It was so fun reading your book, and I felt like you had so many amazing insights, 10 years of infertility, and you have tried so many different avenues to have a child. And so I'm super excited to explore a lot of those with you today. So thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to share. Thank you so much for having me and for that very warm welcome. I appreciate it. And I'm very glad to be here.
Oh, well, let's go ahead and dive right into it. So, what has your journey to motherhood looked like for you?
It's been a long and winding road. I come from like a conservative family, so it was very much like don't bring any babies home, unless you were married and had done everything in a specific order. And so just the whole marriage thing just was never quite happening for me. Failed engagements and all of that. So when I turned 40, I had a friend who had just frozen her eggs or frozen her eggs, and I was in LA at the time. And so she, did the process. She got 8 eggs, which I thought was like a lot. I was so
Yeah.
ignorant. I didn't know. So I was like, oh, great. Well, then I'll do that. And I had been on the pill for essentially like 2 decades. And so I knew I should probably get off and, give my ovaries a chance to wake up. So I did that. And I went to her same doctor, and he let me know I had fibroids, which I already knew, but that, shouldn't be a hindrance to egg freezing.
Hmm.
So he's like, great, let's go ahead and do it. So I, get my meds. I borrowed money at like highway robbery interest rates. Like we did. It was
Yeah.
like insane.
Ugh, we did the
And
same thing.
yeah, then you just like beg, borrow, and steal to try to get
Oh,
this money.
yeah.
And so, I'm doing my injections and I'm going, and they're looking and like they don't see anything. There was like one follicle on one side and there was like nothing on the other side.
Oh my
And
goodness.
he was like, well, something could pop up. Let's keep going. So we keep going, nothing. So he finally just asked me, like, do you want to continue or do you want to stop? And I was like, well, we should just stop because there's like really no point in going forward. At this point, we were like more than halfway through the process. I had used almost all of the meds.
Okay.
And so he said, well, you just got off of the pill, 3 months ago. He's like, what you could do is like wait a little while and then just come every month and retrieve whatever is there. And I was like, does he mean like pay the whole egg freezing cost every month
For
until
one
I
egg every time. So he was hoping to do that to get one egg every time.
one egg each time, or maybe he thought that after more time had passed, there would be more follicles. But
Wow.
either way, like I didn't have like the $12,000 every month to go
Yeah.
and do that
That's
process.
a lot. Yeah.
That just wasn't going to happen, especially back then. It was like 11 years ago.
Mm.
At that point, he's like, well, let's do a test on your FSH and your AMH to see what's happening with the ovaries and stuff. And at that point, he diagnosed me with the diminished ovarian reserve. And then they tell you, well, it's not like other organs or other parts of your body. You're not gonna like magically grow more eggs. Like this is your situation. So at that point, I was devastated. I
Yeah.
thought that like no eggs were going to be forthcoming. I'd never be able to have a child. Like it just seemed very like final.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very
I,
heavy.
yeah, it was very heavy. And what I didn't know then, and he certainly didn't tell me, is that while maybe you don't get more eggs at that point in your life, you can enhance the quality of the eggs that you have,
Okay.
and that's like through lifestyle and things of that nature. And what I did see like a year or two later, going, for your normal scans and whatnot, there were follicles on both sides. So whereas when
Okay.
I first got off the pill, there was only the one follicle, like 3 years later, there were a couple follicles on one side and a couple follicles on the other side.
Oh,
But
wow.
I just didn't have the coins to do the egg freezing at that point. So
Mhm.
at that point, I was just like, well, I'll just, meet someone and, get pregnant naturally, which did not happen. So I, sort of skated through my 40s, like trying to date with intention, like still trying to,
Yeah.
you know, make something happen. But that is that when you are dating with intention in your 40s, it puts unnatural pressure on a relationship unless you just happen to meet a man who is in completely the same headspace as you are. So it was not working out for me, and my fibroids were growing. They were really to the point where you could actually feel them. Like you could just touch
Oh my
my
gosh.
belly and you could feel, like I had one that was kind of like the size of like, well, the shape of like a mango. So it was like
That's
I could feel
huge.
it across the palm of my hand, just laying down. You could feel it. So they were very big.
Was it
Uh,
painful?
in the beginning, no, but at the very end, yes. I didn't want to have a myomectomy. My IVF doctor, the one who I had tried to do the egg freezing with, I had come to him and I was like, well, why don't we just try to do, IUI? And he was like, well, you have to have a myomectomy first. And he wanted to do like the open, C-section cut to go in and take out these fibroids. And then that was the only way that he would work with me
Wow.
to
Okay.
do an AOI. They care about their percentages and ratings and stuff. So he just was not going to deal with a uterus that had fibroids. And I could not take the time off of work to do open C-section cut for
Yeah,
my
that's a big
myomectomy.
recovery.
Very big. And also, I knew many women who had had myomectomies, multiple ones, because the fibroids kept growing back,
Wow. Okay.
and I was afraid of that. So
Mhm.
I couldn't afford it, couldn't take the time off, afraid of them growing back before I would, be able to do something about getting pregnant. So I just didn't have the myomectomy for many years. And then during COVID, I was working at a startup and the stress of the job was like just through the roof. So it caused the fibroids to get even bigger. And at that point, it was extremely uncomfortable.
Okay.
Just like sitting at my desk,
Mm.
trying to power through a day. It was extremely uncomfortable.
Oh.
Yeah. And so at that point, I was like, well, I have to do something. All the, herbs and things that I had been trying to do over the last 10 years did not work for
Mhm.
me. So and I'd had, I had multiple doctors, say it wasn't just the one doctor. He's like, you need to have a myomectomy, fine. I had another doctor when I was like 48, and she was like, you need to have a hysterectomy.
Oh, whoa! Because that's a that takes out some things.
And so I was like, yeah, no, I didn't want to do that. I knew that like a lot of the fibroids are a result of like just the estrogen thrusting and pumping is going to cause them to become bigger. And
Mm,
then when you hit menopause, they tend to shrink on their own. So I
okay.
didn't see a reason to have a hysterectomy
Yeah.
when, I was 48. So
Mm, yeah.
ostensibly going to be hitting menopause sometime soon, and they would just shrink on their own.
Mhm.
So I'm very glad I did not listen to her, because if I had, then I would not have been able to actually, complete this journey in the way that I was able to.
Totally.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, very important. So when I did decide to have my myomectomy, I was very specific about like who I wanted to do it, because at that point I knew like the doctor who said hysterectomy, she was a reproductive endocrinologist, so she was an IVF doctor, but
Mhm.
her specialty was not taking out fibroids.
Okay.
So her solution to that is hysterectomy. You have OBGYNs who are like, oh yeah, I can do it. They want to do the open C-section cut, and that's how they feel comfortable doing it. And that's fine for some people. I found a doctor who only did fibroid and endometriosis surgeries. That's all he did.
That's
That's all.
fantastic. It's
Yeah.
so nice to find a specialist, and I think that was really smart of you to find the right doctor that you felt comfortable with and liked their game plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was a very caring doctor. He called me. I called his office like on a Friday. He called me like Saturday morning at 8 in the morning
Wow.
to talk about like what all it was that I was experiencing and this and that. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I can help you. Like come in." So I came in, and I asked him a lot of questions like what's the most difficult fibroid surgery you've encountered, all sorts of questions around like size and location.
Yeah.
And he, answered my questions to the point that I was satisfied. So we went ahead and did it. And he did not do the open C-section cut. He used the Da Vinci robot. So they essentially cut various sections in the abdomen. They go in with the little robot hands. They cut the fibroid out. Yeah, and then they put all of the pieces after they cut it out and cut it into small pieces into like this bag, and they pull the bag out through your belly button, and then they sew you back up. So I had like four little
That's amazing.
incisions, and then one incision across the belly button, and that was it. And it was a very, like fast recovery.
Wow.
And I was back to work. So he said to me then, he was like, "You could, you could get pregnant now if you want." And I just laughed because at that point I was in perimenopause. So I just really didn't see like how that was going to happen. Like I knew I could like go get a donor egg and then go find some sperm and then, make the embryos and do all of that. But I just didn't really think I was up for that.
Yeah.
And so I had sort of ignored it. I had really just done the myomectomy for relief.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of pain. Yeah.
Right. And so I had already started the adoption journey during COVID. So like 2020, I decided I, was tired of waiting for a partner and I had given up on the fact that I might be able to get pregnant. And so I couldn't do it through the state because New Jersey shut down their like foster services system during COVID completely. That was very odd to me because it's just like, in New Jersey, we were really locked down. Like you had a curfew, you could not be on the street at 8 o'clock. The National Guard was on the street, um,
Wow.
and so you had children who were probably, locked up in houses with abusive parents,
Hmm.
but had, no way of escape. You can't even go to school. Like if you're in an abusive household, at least when you go to school, it's like a bit of an escape from that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like these kids had no escape, and I think the state felt like better for them to be in these households than to, I guess, go into a house and get COVID. And, at that point, everyone thought, like as soon as you get it, you were going to die. Right. So
Yeah.
that was the thought process.
Yeah.
So because I couldn't use the state, I started on the private adoption journey, which is extremely expensive. It's really more expensive than IVF,
Hmm.
to be frank.
Yeah.
But there's I see a lot of value in that. I've got four brothers. One of them is adopted. I always thought, at least one of my kids would be adopted. This is like my
Hmm.
5-year-old brain thinking.
Oh,
Um,
so cute.
I started that process and had gotten chosen by a young lady, really actually very quickly after I had like put together my little book and they started passing it around to prospective birth moms. So I went out and I got all my little stuff, because it was very quick. Like they called me like the middle of April and she was due like the beginning of May.
Wow.
So
That
I
is
go
quick.
get my stuff, meet with her, and then she had her baby, and she decided that she wanted to parent, which is completely understandable.
But that's
So
that's hard to take in too. Yeah.
yeah, it was difficult. It was definitely difficult, but I understood, like
For
having wanted
sure.
to be a mother, for my
Yeah.
entire life, I completely understood where she was coming from. So at that point, we had some ups and downs with the adoption agency, and I was looking at other adoption agencies. And one of them had a newsletter that was not just about traditional adoption, but also about embryo adoption, which I had never heard of before.
Yeah.
And so I, did some more research into that. And then I, remembered that my myomectomy surgeon had said, well, you could carry now if you wanted to. So I, really started researching that just to see like, would this even like be an option for me? How would this come about? Like, where would I, get this embryo from? So that was like a whole journey. But once I like started down that rabbit hole, and that was probably like October, November of 2022.
Okay.
I was able to get my embryos, put together a cycle by March of 2023. And it, the first try, thank God, took. And so I had my baby in November of 2023.
Wow.
Uh,
That's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. So it was like 10 years, of trying to figure out a way uh, to get to motherhood. It was definitely like a winding journey. But yeah, I just feel like, there are just so many things that I was ignorant about. And I would just get discouraged, so many times along the way that sometimes you just sit and stop and do nothing. because you just feel like, well, this isn't working. I don't know what to do next. Or you feel like there's nothing that you can do.
Mhm.
And so that's really one of the reasons why I sort of put everything together in the book, because I know that there are a lot of women who just feel stymied. They
Totally.
just they feel stymied along the journey, like your body's not cooperating.
Mm.
And then doing, frozen embryo transfer, after frozen embryo transfer, and, things aren't working. And
Mhm.
I'm just really grateful too for social media, like for platforms like yours,
Aw.
and like other like fertility influencers, because there were other women. There was one woman who was older than me. She's like 2 years older than me, and she was going through the process and documenting her entire journey, and that actually really helped me because she had a couple failed frozen embryo transfers before she had a successful one. So there was just a lot of different fertility influencers that I was able to sort of, follow their journeys and glean information from. And I feel like all of that together sort of helped me to put together my cycle.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I love that. I really think there are so much that we can learn from each other. And I felt the same way. Like that's what gave me hope through the journey is like hearing other people's stories and being like, okay, well, even if it didn't work out, this is what they tried next and this is what the next steps could be. And it just gives you that hope for what's next and to be able to keep that hope going because it is because sometimes you don't know what the future holds and it's really important to hold on to that hope.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. The hope and mindset really, to me, is like 50%
Hmm.
of the journey. And like my mindset was just before, it was just very much like, oh, well, it's not going to happen for me in this way. Like I said, I really had given up on the whole like being able to be pregnant or carry a pregnancy, and had just really focused on the adoption piece, which is I like I said, a wonderful and great way to become a mother. I didn't really care how it happened. I just wanted to get to the motherhood part.
Totally. Yeah, it's like, I just wanna be a mom. It doesn't matter which way, just wanna be a mom.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, and it's just interesting because the older you get, the more you really start to feel that pressure,
Mhm.
which I certainly was. And my family really had like given up at that point, which it's just like, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah,
But they've all been wonderful. Like since I was able to get pregnant, the babies here, like my village really has stepped up, and that's been really great too because I did it on my own. I don't have a partner, and and that was another thing too that was just like, oh well, should I not? But I come from like my parents divorced like when I was very very young, and
mhm,
then both parents remarried. So
mhm.
blended family also was like normal to
Yeah,
me.
yeah,
um and I just decided that if I'm ever going to be a mom, I don't think there's anything wrong with going it alone, and then doing a blended family situation later. If
totally.
that's what the Lord has for us, then I'm happy to do that. Or
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, you just never know. But I definitely was felt very grateful that I could get to the mom part
For
at
sure,
long
for sure. Yeah, that's huge. It's like this is something that you've been wanting and working for so long, and I'm so grateful that you got your miracle baby. That's it's huge. It's a big deal.
It is. It is. Yeah, you just never think, I think, as a child, that of all the things you want to be, do, have, that's going to be the one thing that would be elusive, hard to do. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, so it really is. It plays with your mind a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it totally does. Where it is, it's like it just seems like that's the natural next step. It's like, oh, I want to have a baby, and it just seems like, oh, this should just happen. And when it doesn't, it's hard to navigate and to know what to do and to figure all of that out. And
Yeah.
it's tricky. Oh, as I was reading your book, one thing I loved about it is you talked about kind of being an advocate for yourself, especially when finding the right doctor for you. Can you walk us through some of that?
I would say like from maybe a little bit before COVID and like through COVID, I just saw and experienced a lot of like different things that led me to know that it's just vitally important that like all doctors are not made the same. Like all white coats are not the same. and that it's just vitally important to make sure that you and your doctor are on the same page. And I think the red flag for me was really when that one doctor was like, "Oh, you should have a hysterectomy." And I had always, promised myself I would never have one. A, because my mother had a hysterectomy, and that was a very hard time in my household. And I think it's something that she, might have regretted. And then I just, even in menopause, which I'm in now, I actually was in menopause when I got pregnant, that even still having your uterus is helpful in that transition. And
Mhm.
so I knew that that was just something that I was not going to do. So when that doctor had suggested that to me, it was like it threw a red flag. But in terms of putting together the team, really like putting together these questions and like holding the doctor's feet to the fire started with finding the right myomectomy doctor, and then after that, looking for the right. I had to get cleared by an OB because of my age. I just happened to find this OB who, had had her first baby at 51. No, her first baby at 50, her second baby at 52, and she was single. And so it just felt like, oh, okay, this is like, like a God wink,
Totally
like
makes
letting me know
sense.
that
I
I'm on
love
the
that
right.
God wink, that's so cute.
Yeah, it was so crazy. And so she was just very supportive and, obviously cleared me. Then she, recommended me to different maternal fetal medicine doctors because you have to have that as well. And then another thing that sort of threw a red flag for me, which let me know that I had to ask deeper questions, was trying to find the right IVF doctor and trying to find an embryo adoption agency that would work with me. The first one that I, had seen in the newsletter, they would not work with me because I was single and because of my age. And then the second one, not that they would not work with me, but they said they did not have like a wide variety of embryos, so they didn't have African American embryos. And it was the third, I think either the third or the fourth embryo adoption agency that did have like a plethora. They didn't have a problem with me being single. They didn't have a problem with me being 49. So that, that was fine. And as I went along from agency to agency, you start to learn the questions to ask. And then for the IVF doctors, most of them, are not going to be like, no, we won't work with you. Most IVF clinics want,
Mhm.
but even with that, you want a, a clinic that is going to like treat you the way you want to be treated,
Yeah.
not just, give you whatever medicine, not hear you when you say, well, I've tried this or I've tried that. Um,
Mhm.
and so that I had to interview three different IVF clinics before I found the right one. And, they ran my blood work a bunch of times, which was great because then I was able to see like when I was not in the right range for like certain readouts. And
Mhm.
we were able to wait until I could, take enough supplements or herbs or whatever I needed to do to get all of my blood work in line because I just wanted everything to be optimized,
Yeah. Yeah.
before we started doing the frozen embryo transfers. And then they also, knowing that I had been in menopause for a year, we had to get the uterus, fluffed up and whatnot. And so we did the right series of estrogen and progesterone to get all that together. So they just did like a really thorough job, like of putting together the plan for me.
Mhm.
And I feel like that had a lot to do with why I was successful. So, like starting out on the journey, I wasn't like, oh, I have my list of questions, but it was just like, from like knocking on doors or like going door to door.
Yeah.
Um, that I then put together this list of questions. So that is in the back of the book as like a resource section.
Yeah.
Um,
That was awesome. You have like a whole list of lots of resources, like all the supplements you took and everything. So, yeah, that's a great spot for everyone to look at because I was reading that and I was like, this is fantastic.
yeah, just like, it takes so long like to sort of like peruse the entire internet. And,
Mhm.
we often don't have time for that. Life is busy. So yeah, I pulled all the resources that I could to help people investigate, their IVF doctors and to have reviews so people
Mhm.
can say exactly what their experience was with this doctor. I had seen on your website where you had talked about the things that helped you to success, and just like, lifestyle, cleaning up the diet,
Mhm.
all of that stuff. Like it doesn't seem like it, not that it doesn't seem like it wouldn't be important, but I think people don't give enough weight to it.
Oh, for sure. I think that's something that a lot of times really kind of just gets looked over or stepped over. And I never had thought about like cleaning up my diet or things like that. And then I had a friend who she was on her third round of IVF and she was like, I'm getting rid of the nail polishes. I'm getting rid of all of my hair dye and all the sugar and flour. And she had gotten pregnant that next time on her third round of IVF. And I was like, well, if it worked for her this round, I'm just going to try it and give it my all because I've got nothing to lose here. Like, if we're putting this much money into it, I'm going to do everything I can in my power. And that's one thing, reading your book too, that I read that like you had done all of that. You had cleaned up all of those products and
Yeah, I got rid of those nail glues and I stopped relaxing my hair and I got the reverse osmosis water treatment thing for the kitchen and got rid of all those cleaners that were abrasive. Yeah, I really felt like that had some part to play and like really in my diminished ovarian reserve. And even though I didn't use my own eggs to get pregnant, I definitely felt like I needed to do everything in my power to make the body like as strong and as clean as possible to host the embryo. So yeah, to me that was really important.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And it was interesting too, like thinking about all of that. I feel like it was the one area that I felt like I had a little sense of control in a world
Mhm.
that felt so chaotic that like I didn't necessarily know what was going on or couldn't control like the outcome or those things. But I was like, I can at least like kind of micromanage, I guess, some of these things.
Yeah, exactly. No, and yeah, I think you do want like some semblance of control. Like you don't know what's going to happen when this embryo, is put in here. Is it going to stay? Is it going to leave? But yeah, these are the things that you can control. Going to get your acupuncture, which is just so helpful. Like you can really feel in your body, like how it's shifting things, how it's helping the blood to flow. I thoroughly enjoy like every acupuncture appointment. And
It's
really need to get
fantastic.
yeah, yeah, I need to get back on that. It feels like everything kind of falls to the wayside like after the baby gets here.
Oh my gosh, right? I know. I've like all those so many things that I was doing during IVF. I was like, wow, I really should get back on some of those habits.
Yeah, yeah, because when you think about like how strong and like leading up to it, because you've cleaned everything up, you feel really great. But yeah, like the first thing I did after the baby came was just I was back on my coffee like every day. And while it does give you that short term boost, like it's not great, it's not sustainable for me anyway for daily drinking. Yeah, so there's a lot I need to get back onto in terms of just normal health and longevity. But yeah, but I definitely feel like all those things like greatly contributed to like my success on that first round.
Totally, totally. And you had done a lot of supplements and stuff as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, I was doing, of course, and I had sort of ramped up my supplements during COVID because I just, I was living in like New York Metro at the time, so I just was very in an apartment building, so I was just very like paranoid about like not getting sick. So I was like on my vitamin B and D, and chlorophyll. I was doing like the red raspberry and the Vitex. I was doing copper and zinc CoQ10. I was doing like a mitochondrial support for cell replication health. What else was I doing? There was a bunch more. Like it took me so long to take all of my supplements in the morning, but and then I was doing like bone broth
Wow.
in the mornings. The fruits and the pineapples, like
That's some
everything.
serious dedication right there.
I,
That's amazing. That's amazing.
yeah, I was like you said. I was like, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna give it my all. I did all of that, and yeah, and I was just hoping for the best. I'm just really grateful that I had a positive outcome. But yeah, and one of the fertility influencers that I was watching, her name is Simply Tanika, and she had had like I think two or three failed frozen embryo transfers, and her doctor, the IVF doctor, couldn't figure out like what the issue was, so
Mhm.
they sent her to a reproductive immunologist
Okay.
and they ran tests on her and put her on a protocol. that was specific to her. And what was crazy about it is like one of the things they gave her was like hydroxychloroquine, which had like been demonized during COVID as like some kind of like quack medicine or whatever for COVID, but it was like a malaria medication.
Okay.
And so as soon as they put her on that protocol, the very next transfer that she did took. And so it was really interesting to me. And so I had like kind of put that in the back of my mind, like if we do this transfer and for some reason the uterus is like rejecting the embryo or seeing it as like some outside thing that it wants to get rid of, that I was
Mm-hmm.
going to go to a reproductive immunologist and see like do I have any sort of like immune issues or anything
Mm-hmm.
that would like keep me from being able to carry. But that was again like that was new. Like she was so generous to record her call with her doctor. Like she was
Yeah.
on speakerphone with the doctor, and then she recorded the whole thing and put it on YouTube, which was just so generous because again that's like another thing that I would never think of to do.
Yeah, I hadn't ever heard of that, but that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of times maybe like some IVF doctors like don't know, or maybe there's not a good reproductive immunologist in their system or what have
Mhm,
you. They'll just have you like doing embryo transfer after embryo transfer, and it could be an immune issue that's
mhm. Yeah.
happening. Yeah. So yeah, that's why I was just like, okay, we need to like put all this information into a resource
Mhm,
for women. And like I said, like these things are like specific to me, but at least it gives you like a jumping off point for whatever your issues are. Then you know how to question your IVF doctor or your MFM or your OBGYN. You know what kind of questions to ask if you're
yeah.
not seeing success.
For sure, for sure. Because I think that sometimes when we are, kind of in the infertility world, like a lot of times I think we're just, for me at least, like I was sitting down and just being like trying to soak everything in and not realizing that, like, oh my gosh, I need to be my own advocate here. Like, it's okay to ask questions. They're totally up for that. And then, like, so I started keeping like a notepad in my phone. And anytime I thought of a question, I would just write it down, and then next time I had my next appointment, I'd either ask the nurse or doctor, and they were always super responsive. And like if they didn't know, they would find someone who would. And yeah, I think it's really good to ask questions because then it's like, then we can feel part of the process too. And like I felt like that was empowering for me to be able to do that as well. Like it made a difference.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it helps you like to actually formulate your plan.
Hmm.
And I know like because I had so many years of what just felt like inaction because I didn't know what to do. It's
Hmm.
important to me that, women just even if it feels like it can't happen for you right now today or whatever the situation is, whether that's monetarily or you're trying to clean up your diet or you have to go get a surgery first, that just keep planning, and that it's not too late. I had my MFM doctor in New Jersey, my first one. I had ended up moving in the middle of the pregnancy to Georgia, so I had to get another set of doctors when I got down here. But my MFM in New York, she told me that the oldest woman that she had delivered was 67 years old. This
That's
woman had
incredible. 67.
she had a partner who
It's
was in his
amazing.
40s.
That's so
A partner,
fun.
and it's crazy. And they wanted to have a child together, and obviously she didn't have eggs, so they got a donor. But it was like his sperm, and she had an uneventful pregnancy and delivered at 67. Um, so while I don't, for me, I wouldn't want to like wait that late, but but it's just, it's not too late for women who are in their 40s and whatnot, 50, early 50s, 50s. That people are still out here doing it. So just make your plans and get to it.
I love that. Well, and it's really true. It's not too late. And I do think that's something that was even something that like I had started to worry about. And because I'm 37 right now, but we're not ready to have more kids yet, but we would like more kids in the future. And so, yeah, we had called our fertility doctor and I was like, what is like, "What, I can
What is
you
it
walk me
called?
through all of this?" Like, yeah,
Yeah,
he was so great, like, he was so cute. He was totally laughing at me, and he's like, "You have nothing to worry about." He was like,
yeah.
"You've got tons of time." And I was like, "Wait, really?" Like, I don't know what it is. It's like that maternal clock or something, like, or I don't know, social pressures or whatever, all of a sudden hit it, and then I'm like, "No, I don't need to stress about this." He's right. We do have tons of time. Like,
You do. You have tons of time. In my 30s, I don't even think I was really pressed. I just thought wrongly that in my 40s I could just, turn up pregnant at any given point in time, which was not the truth. So yeah, there was a lot that I wish I had known like in my 20s and 30s, and I would have like tried to freeze my eggs earlier, had I known. If I had known about lifestyle and toxins and sort of like the foods that we eat and the things that we've talked about, the nail glue, the eyelash glue, all the chemicals that we, treat our hair with, I think I would have done some things differently, but we just didn't know those things back
yeah,
then. And everything that we're learning now is just so new. Like
for
a lot of
sure.
people, yeah, a lot of people that I talk to about embryo adoption, embryo donation have never heard of it. And it's funny that there isn't more talk about it because there are so many frozen embryos just in cryo, like all over the United States where the parents don't really know like what to do with them. Like they don't
Mhm.
want to like I wouldn't want to donate an
Mm,
embryo to like science. I would want to like donate it to another person. Um,
mhm,
but there just wasn't. There's so much attention and work towards like doing all of this IVF, but not
mhm.
really a lot of energy or attention on like, well, what are we going to do with all these frozen embryos?
Yeah,
Uh, so I do hope that that becomes more the norm and not like an aberration,
yeah,
um,
for sure.
in the future. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, but it definitely helps my motherhood dreams, to come true. So,
Totally.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can't say enough good things about it.
Oh, would you be up for walking us through a little bit of that embryo adoption process? Because that's something I'm not super familiar with. I would love to
Yeah,
hear more on that.
yeah, it's funny because it's different for every person. So for me, I ended up finding a IVF clinic that also had what they called like an embryo adoption agency as a part of it.
Cool.
So you would go onto their website to the adoption agency part, and after they like cleared you and vetted you to be looking at the donors, then you could actually go and see pictures of the maternal donor, paternal donor. Usually it would be pictures of them as a child. Every now and then you might see a picture of the donor as like an adult. And then it would have their entire history, medical history. And then every now and then you might get like a questionnaire that they would have filled out about why they decided to donate, sperm or eggs.
Nice.
And sometimes you would see these embryos like as a group or a collection, and then sometimes you would just see them like as a solo. And they had all races. They had Indian, they had Latino, they had African American, white. So that was like great for me because that was like my first sort of agency that I had come across that had that. There are other IVF clinics. There's one in California specifically, California Conceptions, that sort of runs their program the same way, but you have to go to California to do it. And then there's, just other IVF clinics who, like, if you go on their clinic website as a part of the menu, there'll be a drop down like that has to do with donation and adoption. So that's also in the resources section, like all the different places that you can do it. There is a fee associated with adopting the embryos, but it's much much less than like getting a egg donor separately and sperm separately and creating embryos on your own. So
Right.
there is a savings there. But I have a girlfriend who is my same age who just did a frozen embryo transfer with adopted embryos, and she found her embryos on a Facebook group. um,
That's
so
awesome.
yeah, so she did not, there was no cost to her.
Mhm. Got
She
it.
just met a family who loved her and had these embryos and were happy to give them to her.
Oh, that's
So
really sweet. I love
mhm,
hearing that.
yeah, yeah. So there's all kinds of ways that it can happen, just depending on what resources you decide to use and how quickly you want to move.
Yeah. Wow, that's
Mhm.
super cool. That's
Yeah. So
awesome.
and it's anonymous, so I don't know. I can see all these pictures. I don't know the names of the
Mhm.
donors. I don't know like where they're from necessarily. Sometimes you think you might be able to tell because there's all this medical work that they have to fill out, and so you can see like, well, what clinic did the intake on this donor egg, or what clinic did
Mhm.
the intake on this sperm. But for my child, I'm glad that I have like so many pictures and things so he can see, exactly, what his maternal donor looked like, what his paternal donor looked like. I think that's important to know, something about like where you come from. And then I'm sure that, as soon as he does a 23andMe, all of his relatives are gonna, pop up. I
Yeah,
say like we're his family, but he's got a ton of relatives out there, and I'm sure siblings too. I think his embryo was a part of a batch of embryos that were
that's
donated, so he's got some siblings out there too. So I would love for him to be able to find them, when he's wants to, voices that he wants to do that.
totally, that would be so neat. I
Yeah.
love that. Just more to add to the village.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's really special, and I think that's a beautiful perspective on it. I love that.
yeah, I mean, having seen like in my own family, adopted folks, and back in the day, a closed adoption was really closed. Like you couldn't get any information um,
Mhm.
from these agencies. And then just even people in my own family, back in the day, folks would lie about like who your father was and stuff, especially like in our community. Like folks would just like not be telling the truth. Yeah, I've seen like the effect that has on people to
Mhm.
like have questions about it or not be quite sure, and I just would never want that for my child. So like
Mhm.
any bit of information that I can give them, I think is helpful, and it's it's a part of the story now. It's not like something I'm going to wait until he's 5 and then be like, oh, by the way, like no, like we have little storybooks, that have the whole like donation, like the storybook describes the donation process,
Oh,
and in the
that's
back
fantastic.
I've like pasted pictures of his donors so he can see them, and he'll like just grow up knowing that, oh, those are my donors. This is my mom.
I love that. I think that's a real I love that you had thought that through and done all that. And I think that's really cute having the pictures at the back of the book. That makes it really special.
Yeah, yeah, it's his book. Yeah, I think it's really important. I think good, bad, or indifferent. Like if you know just something about like your starting point, your jumping off point, it helps to orient you in the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
as you go out to fulfill your purpose. So I just think it's important.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I'm thinking back. So you had 10 years that you were going through this journey. Do you have any words of wisdom or advice to give those that are in the thick of it?
Yeah, I would just say like have a song or a few songs that you listen to that help you, to restore your hopefulness, whatever that might be. And then I would just say to keep the faith. Like there are going to be very long periods where it feels like literally nothing is happening, and you're caught up in the drudgery of life and jobs. And for me, I've always just been a person like who worked really hard during the pandemic. I was working in a startup, so we were doing like 16, 18-hour days, and I was just like, what am I doing this for? Like I'm a single person, like rattling around in this apartment, banging my head against the wall 18 hours a day, like for what? Like like what am I making all this money for what? So I definitely know what that feels like when you're just like caught up in the drudgery of life and work, and it feels like nothing on the personal side is happening or going right. And I would just say that like, if someone had told me in, 2019, 2020, 21, 22 that, I would be able to carry a baby, had laughed in their, I was laughing in my doctor's face when he said it. So you just never know, how things can turn around for you. And you're going to feel down moments. Try not to get stuck in those for too long. Feel it entirely, right to have those disappointed feelings, but just keep that spark of hope that things can turn around for you, because they really can.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much. I think that is such beautiful words of encouragement. And I think it's really true to just not, feel those moments, but also just let them go and just keep going. Keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah. I had a friend. He adopted a son probably like 7, 8 years before I got pregnant, and he's a single dad too. And he was he was like, I've never been married. I've been celebrating all these people's weddings and all these things, all these years, babies. His registry for his son is like the biggest registry I ever saw. And so
That's
I
awesome.
and I know, like, and I see a lot of social media accounts where, it's hard to, like, someone's having their fourth, fifth, sixth baby, whatever. It can be hard to
Mhm.
celebrate that. It can be hard as a single person. People are getting married and married and married, and you can't seem to manage it one time. I would say just continue to celebrate with those who celebrate, continue to sow into your friends, continue to, buy those gifts for those friends, dote on your nieces and nephews if you have some. If you don't have some, adopt some, from a friend. Just
Mhm.
when you send that energy out and you sow those seeds, you do reap your harvest. It comes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I feel like part of that is like, serving in your community and things kind of what you're talking about, like adopting your other nieces and nephews and the kids around you. And it makes a heart full and happy that can be really heartbroken and it can fill it with lots of joy.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah,
Oh.
it helps me. It helped me. I have a lot of nieces and nephews, um, and getting to parent them a little bit. Definitely, it was great for me in those very still in low moments where it just seemed like the adoption was never going to happen. Just where you just feel like you're ramming your head against the wall.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I totally relate to that. I have 14 nieces and nephews, and that was like, I know,
Wow.
right? There's a lot. Yeah. And so it is, it's like just diving into that. Like anytime I was sad, I was like, I just need to hop on a flight and go see them. I just need to give everyone a
Yeah,
hug.
yeah, absolutely. It does help. I would do like one of my nieces, she at that time wanted to like sing and like do musical theater, so we would be doing Zooms where I'd like be teaching her like to sing, little songs from Annie and things like this.
Oh.
Yeah, it was so fun. Like, I would look forward to those little calls the most. But yeah, all of that, it does help you get through those moments.
Oh, that's so cute. I love that so much.
Mm.
Oh, well, is there anything else you would like to add to this, Kia?
Let me think. Let me think. I guess like the main thing that I would say is just start doing your research, on the different doctors, that you would like to use for when it is your time to make that move, and just start like putting the plan together now, even if it doesn't seem like it's something you can do today. Like the more information you have, the more research you have done, just the easier it is to sort of put it all together when it is like go time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think that's wonderful advice. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, Kia, thank you so, so much for being on the podcast today. If listeners want to connect with you, is there a good spot for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can find me on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube at My Youthful Longevity. So it's all one word, at MY Youthful Longevity, all run together. They can find the book, Fooling My Fertility and Expecting at 50 How I Had a Baby in Midlife and You Can Too, on Amazon. So under Kia Glover, you should be able to find that. And yeah, that's it. I'm happy to answer questions. So if anyone wants to hit me in my DMs, I do get a lot of questions from ladies in my DMs about like what I did. I'm often on there just talking about supplements and different things that I took leading up to my cycle. So I'm happy to share more about that and just encourage anyone who is on their fertility journey.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll make sure to link everything in the description so you can so anyone can access those. And I would definitely encourage anyone to check out your book. It was fantastic. And I thought it was just well written, beautiful, the way everything was laid out. And it just had so many resources in it and information, and it had a ton of hope in it as well. And so it just was a beautiful book. So I definitely recommend it. That was a real joy to read. And
Well,
oh,
thank you, Christina. I appreciate that, and I'm glad
oh,
that we were able to share together today, and hopefully just give some ladies some hope for the future. And I just thank you for your platform. I know you're a busy mama of twins, um, so yeah, trying to be a content creator and a
oh,
mom, work like it's a lot. So kudos to
yeah.
you. And thank you for this platform that we can have to just come and learn and have hope for the future.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you so much, Kia. And thank
Thank
you
you.
to all of you for joining us today. We appreciate it and hope you have an awesome day.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us here at the Infertility Club. Don't forget, you got this. For more hope, support, and positivity, watch this next video.